Welcome back to the C Morning Show, everyone. It is just past 8 in the a.m. and it's leading us to our second discussion of the day. Now, many of you living here in Indonesia know that there is an election coming up next year.
Yes.
And young voters will arguably determine the outcomes of the 2024 general election in Indonesia. In fact, a significant proportion of Generation Z, who were born between 1997 and 2012, will have come of age and do have the right to vote in the upcoming election. Meanwhile, millennials who were born between 1981 and 1996 will also form the majority of the electorate.
Oh, okay. This is going to be my first election.
Wow.
I was born in 2014. Culturally, these two cohorts are very different from the older generation, with both Gen Z and Millennials growing up in the digital age and having very different experiences compared to the older generation.
Indeed. Why'd you point at me when you said that? Anyway,
Older generation.
To find out more about the youth and political participation for this upcoming election, we're now going to have a talk with Youth Advocacy and Development Consultant Margianta Surahman. Good morning, Margianta. Thank you for joining us. Great to see you again.
Good morning. Thanks for having me again.
Hi. All right, let's jump into our first question. Now, polling agency Indikator Politik predicts nearly 60% of eligible voters in 2024 will be younger than 40. That's a big increase from the 40% in the 2019 elections. Now, what can you see from that young voters in the upcoming 2024 general election generally?
Yeah, I think we have to admit that the power of young people in Indonesia is not only in the terms of number, that there will be a huge addition to the voters group, but also in a matter of their concerns, because young people nowadays, they grew up in a different era, in a different age compared to the other previous generations, where the technology was advanced very rapidly, and also a lot of social political issues, not only domestically in our country, but also regionally in ASEAN or also globally as a whole. And recently we also had a pandemic as well, right?
Yeah.
The COVID-19 pandemic. We haven't had a huge global pandemic since like 100 years. So basically young people nowadays have faced so much, and they have so much to speak up of, so much concerns to say, especially to be heard of in the politics. So I think it's going to be a quite game-changing sphere that we're going to have in the next election.
What are some of these issues that you think are on the forefront of the youth's minds for this particular election?
So basically there is a very interesting reports recently. One of them was from British Council, the Next Generation report. So based on about 3,000 young people all across Indonesia and all the major islands in Indonesia, basically they say about the issues that they care about, right? Number one actually was education, as usual, right?
Okay.
Access to education, equitable, quality education. Also the second one is employment. So just based on those two top issues, we can see that actually what matters to young people nowadays is day-to-day issues that we sometimes take granted of. And maybe some people in the high-level positions or politicians take granted of. Sometimes maybe they say things on their campaign about social justice, about access to social protections, quality education, and better employment opportunities. But you know, elections after elections, we're just waiting for something more concrete.
Any real change.
And exactly, so young people are starting to speak up in social media, spilling the tea here and there. So using their own ways, using memes, you know, speaking up, education, employment, even climate change as well, right? So this report actually is very interesting, and also one of them is regarding political participation, which we will be discussing more later.
Okay, so yeah, well, that's interesting to me and surprising a little bit that on the young people's mind is actually, because it would be, as a parent, that would be of concern to me for my kids, but I wouldn't expect kids to already be thinking that far ahead. And I guess it makes sense because they would want to secure their future. Now, in contrast to other democratic countries, Indonesia's political system and culture have placed a significant emphasis on leaders and figures rather than loyalty to a particular political party. Like if we talk about Generation Z, who will have come of age and have the right to vote in the upcoming election, how interested are they to get to know the candidate for the people's representative of a leader as opposed to just the party in general?
Yeah, I'm still going to reference the report that I mentioned earlier, the Next Generation report from British Council in Indonesia. So basically, it said that young people nowadays, according to the trends of their research, they pay more attention to the individual political figures rather than the political parties or the political parties' visions as a whole. Because as we know, I think it's quite a common secret. If we see all of these different political parties, sometimes, me personally, I see they're only different colors of the flags, of the attributes, right? Of the people inside of it. But when you try to dig in, right, what is their ideology? What is their concrete policy that they want to propose, especially to young voters? I think young people are having a hard time to pick it up. And also one of the highlights is we have to highlight also the inequity access of internet access. Sometimes young people use internet to find more information, especially regarding to political issues, social issues, right? And then unequal access to internet also resulted in unequal understanding of young people trying to digest what is going on a national level, on regional level, on their own cities. So basically, the roots of the problem here is basically inequality. So young people also, I think, seeing all of those issues, because I think there's a saying, right? Young people nowadays are quite apathetic towards politics. They don't pay attention, etc. They just sit around in cafes. I'm just cosplaying. I'm just cosplaying, right?
From Paul's generation.
Yeah. But basically, one of the findings of the report, and one of the findings, basically me just talking to my friends, we are not politically apathetic.
Yes, that's true.
We are politically frustrated.
Wow.
Because sometimes we know how it feels to be not represented by politicians, etc. I'm quoting this directly from my friend's platform. It's a very good platform, What's Up Indonesia.
I like that platform.
You like that platform, right? They just explain
very simply
complex issues. Basically, we are not politically apathetic. We are just politically frustrated. How do we get our voices be delivered? When are we going to have our voices delivered and represented by politicians?
And eventually gets frustrating enough where you don't voice your opinions and your thoughts, right?
Yeah, and this comes to my question: how do these candidates needs to strategize the approach to Gen Z and Millennials, because this is going to be very challenging for them?
Yeah, I'm going to say less PR works and just more research. Based, evidence-based policies, basically speaking to the right people and also listening to them, not only hearing them. Sometimes when you are going to be elected, you're running for the office, you go for, to the factories and to rural areas and just okay, and then just a good, 1-minute video, you feel good about yourself going and taking pictures with them. But do you really listen to them? Do you really invite them, right? And especially, for example, there are children forums all across Indonesia. So young people have been invited and also spoken on regional level, cities level, when they are going to make like some sort of like local law on regulations. Young people from these children forums in several cities in Indonesia, they are invited to just sit and then also share their opinions. So those practices already exist, and how do politicians, use the same way, similar platforms, similar methods, if they only have the willingness, right? If they only have the sensitivity to see that actually young people can actually be involved meaningfully. I'm not saying just being involved, engaged, like we're invited to webinars and then here's your rice box and go home, right? Here's your free t-shirt, take a picture with us, and that's done. But how to involve young people meaningfully, like that's a different level. You need, a specific budget, a specific team of trying to listening to actually what do young people need and want.
And young people are starting to be a little bit more, like it's hard to kind of just pull the wool over the eyes of the sheep, if you will, these days, because people are just more understanding of how everything works. And you touched on a little bit about how there's inequality when it comes to internet access. In fact, many people get their information from the internet. So I want to shift gears for a second in regards to political information and campaigns that are done online on social media. Yes, we are aware enough not to believe everything we see, and we fact check and make sure something is real before we believe it, but not everyone does that. So how much of an impact and how dangerous could it be if social media campaigns are misused for this upcoming election, especially to reach the younger generation where a lot of what they do is online?
Yeah, based on the Next Generation report, one of the main concerns of young people in Indonesia care about is actually fake news. How do we navigate, tell which one is the real news, which one is the fake news? So basically, it is a challenge, not only about the inequality of the access, but also educating how we navigate ourselves in the internet, not only personally as well, but I think it's also an institutional responsibility, like the education system. For example, do we teach critical thinking much about to our students, to our young people, rather than just memorizing stuff? So basically, I think it's also a big homework, not only individual structural level, like you're like this, you can't tell which one is fake news because you're lazy, and no, it's not like that. It's just a surface of a bigger iceberg. It's a bigger problem, which is also related to the education system. So I think all of the what young people cares about education, employment, the very fundamental part, and then comes later about also they care about personal freedom. They want to express themselves without having to persecute it and everything, in a very safe space, free from sexual violence even, etc. So I think that those are like voices that we need to hear more, and to see the problem is actually intersectional. It's connected from one to another.
Very much so. A lot of these things do overlap.
True. Now, in your personal view, how important are young people to really understand social political issues like this, and how important actually are their voices?
Yeah, so young people, as I said, is important, not only in terms of number as new upcoming voters, but also in terms of the voices that they bring, because they can change the discourse of our political sphere, because they bring so much intersectional issues that maybe hasn't been talked before. One of them is also like young people care about mental health nowadays, and they want to fight against hustle culture that I spoke here previously before about work and well-being. So I think, instead of like other usual business as usual, young people are very important in politics, because they can be also serve as a part of a civic engagement, trying to hold the government accountable for their policies, trying to hold the politicians, trying to hold the people's representative accountable. So they speak for the people. They speak for the much, not just the few, because as we know, we don't have so much working class in the politicians, formally engaged in politics, right? People who speak our daily basis, people who don't speak only like you're speaking to the camera all the time, but you're speaking to like one person to another, in understanding their struggles. Who is the politicians nowadays that speaks about mental health, about the budgetary that we need, about our local puskesmas needs training for the counselors, also needs youth-friendly programs for youth to access their healthcare in their communities, so they can have a free counselor at the puskesmas with great counselors who talks about that, like very specifically, but just like, okay, we have, all of these, trying to push young people just to fight and compete. We have to support the economic growth. So they see us as numbers, but we are individuals with stories, with concerns, with problems of our own, with our family, with communities. When are we going to be heard? So I think that's why we are really important in politics, because young people nowadays, when they are really engaged meaningfully, I think they can really bring a more colorful discourse to our political sphere.
Agree with you. So let's talk a little bit about this trend that has been happening in recent years, where younger public figures seem to be replacing kind of older, well-known political figures who have only a name in politics. This can possibly reach a new audience or a younger audience as well. What's your take on it, and should it play a role in politics?
Right.
In your opinion.
Okay, I've been waiting for this answer the whole session. So I've talked about this with my friend, researcher Esmeru, who's focusing also on politics. So she said actually signs that this shows signs of failure from political parties, that actually they failed to serve one of their tasks, which is to regenerate new quality leaders, and then to facilitate the transitions of power from one generation to another, right? Because when you fail to find great young leaders to continue to serve in your party, not only your party, but the people foremost, right? And then it shows like you have failed, right? But maybe not failed, or maybe is it a deliberate mistake? I don't know. Only they know, right?
I thought it was all this time. I thought it was a deliberate strategy.
It is a deliberate strategy, probably because they're easy vote getters, right?
Right.
You might want to take just the shortcut to just get what you want. But so then we can see, so do they really care? Who do they really care about? Right? Who are they serving? Their political parties, their own elites, or is it the people? If it's the people, then you will pay great attention seriously, not only drawing influential, famous people. I'm not saying I don't have anything against them. If they are open to work, to change, to educate themselves and be a good parliament members, then so be it. But then, you know...
and there have been some, by the way, in the past as well.
Elections after elections, young people, I think we want just, you know, like speed up the process and just see concrete examples nowadays, because sometimes, because there is a reason why we are politically frustrated, right? I mentioned before, we're not apathetic, you know, especially if we heard like one politician say like, okay, I'm going to speak up against the mass layoff in the tech workers industry. I'm going to speak up against the, you know, the careers that's being exploited. One of them just died recently because overworked and underpaid. I will speak up about mental health for young people. I will speak up on climate change and supporting renewable energy concretely. This is the plan. This is the plan. Maybe young people will, oh, okay, I will listen to
Right.
Or about sexual violence, right? Women, gender equality, fighting the gender pay gap for women, providing, you know, basically care for working women, etc., for their you know, maternity leave, etc. So maybe those issues that they say it and then they implement it and they have a plan actually for it nearby the upcoming election. I think many young people will be standing up and lining up for a vote.
Yeah, I agree completely. You already have an advantage with name recognition.
Yeah.
It's what they do with it.
Yeah, so it's basically what you're saying is for these candidates to be more sensitive with these issues, or, you know, to be very much listening part of themselves. They need to really engage in the issues, right? So millennials and Gen Zs, who will make up for more than 50% of voters, could change this in the 2024 elections by what you're saying. So if they play more roles, active roles in politics, now how do you think the younger generation should respond to this political year? Because it's going to be only 1 year from now. It's going to be on the 14th of February, right?
Yeah.
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day.
Vote. It's a vote day. It's a voting day.
Time to break free of your toxic relationship. Real healthy relationship. Find your better half.
Well said.
In the parliament. So, but anyway, so what I'm saying is young people should realize their potential. They are not just numbers.
Yeah.
You have also voices to say, and you are entitled for it, and find a way for you to deliver it, to channel it. And basically, you know, being politically engaged is not only jumping to formally participate in a political party or formally running for office as parliament members, right? Or even formally running as president. So I think this is what sometimes young people, when they say, I don't want to go into politics, because they always mean it, okay, politics is impenetrable. Politics is, you know, like basically being kept by certain people. But you can also be, you know, speaking about politics, sharing about politics, you know, involved, just being you know, a citizen, a concerned citizen, and say, you know, doing everything you can to deliver what's your concern: education, employment, job opportunities, or gender equality, or climate change, everything, anything that you can ever want. Now we have like, we are in a technologically advanced era, you know, in social media, also rallying in the grassroots level, community level. Do whatever you can with what you have. I mean, that's my message, I think, for young people nowadays. You don't have to be formally engaged or just join one of the teams, you know, like campaign teams only, right? You can work in the community, and if it's that politics, yeah, I think it's just a part of politics.
Definitely.
Activism.
Yeah, because policies, in order to pass a policy, right? Public policy, there will be certain politicians involved, and when you hold them accountable in your process, campaign, research, advocacy, nurturing, just assisting, helping people on grassroots level, on your schools, I think that's also make a difference. So.
Yeah, I think that sequence of deciding first what it is that you believe in, what it is that you value, before deciding who or what you want to vote for is the right steps, and not everyone takes it in that order. What, in your opinion, right now, at this moment, what is the climate like when it comes to political knowledge in youngsters?
Yeah, political knowledge.
How good are the young people's political knowledge at this point?
So I think I have to also admit that I'm quite, you know, I'm in a privileged circle.
You're
in a way
exception.
That most of my friends, right, are quite formally educated and everything. Also, like, you know, have critical thoughts about the policies, etc. But I think we have to acknowledge that this doesn't happen on every level. So I want to reiterate what I said about inequality, right? About the access to education, not only formal education, but all kinds of education. And we have to question the pedagogy of our education.
Okay.
How do you, teach them how to think? As well, I think it's very important. I think we have to go based on the fundamental level, basically, to reflect upon our next steps. Before we talk further about your questions, very fundamental levels of our society, and then we can proceed to more complex ones.
I really like that perspective, is teach young kids how to think as opposed to telling them what to think. Really good point, and we'll create a better future for ourselves. Ms. Gian, it's always a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Ms. Gian.
We still have just under a year to go before the election, so I'm sure we're going to chat again at a later time as elections draw near. But thank you so much for joining us this Monday morning.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're up for another short break. In the meantime, make sure, if you haven't already done so, that you're following all our social media platforms. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at See Today News. We'll be right back.